Welcome to the Ravensvale Coven. The Coven features short, independent stories with themes ranging from dark horror and fantasy to any other disturbing fiction. The Coven contains stories written outside the ongoing storyline of the Ravensvale universe. The stories are submitted by listeners, authors, and storytellers and are carefully curated by the staff of Ravensvale. To learn about our guidelines for submitting your story for consideration, go to www.ravensvale.com and click on the Submission tab on the menu bar.
The Ravensvale Coven is part of our dark fantasy horror anthology podcast and may contain explicit language or thematic elements not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The story you are about to hear was performed during Appalachian Horror Fest 2024, an event produced by Small Raven Media and held at Central Cinema in Knoxville, Tennessee. This performance features Things Do Go Bump in the Night, an original story written and performed by the talented Susan Gillum. As you listen, let yourself drift into a realm where the boundary between reality and the supernatural seamlessly vanishes.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here this evening. I got that tall mic. There we go. We're on. All right. This last week, I actually got to go home and visit family in West Virginia, and it was like traveling into a Ravensvale podcast. I'm driving down the road, and like lots of Appalachia, deep valley, river running through it. Somehow they managed to cut like a railroad or a road into the side of that. And it's mid-morning, and I come upon this sign for this road up ahead, and the sign is for Witcher Creek Road. Woo! And you look up this road, and this creek is running down into this valley, and like again, it's mid-morning. You look down this valley, and all there is clouds and dark. The sun hadn't even made it over the mountains into that valley, and I was like, that is Ravensvale right there. So, in thinking of that, I think of all those people that moved from Ireland and Scotland and England and all of Europe, and even now all over the world, that have moved to places here in Appalachia. And the story I'm going to tell today is from some of those people that moved here. It's set over in Ireland, and specifically it's a place called Rathlin, Ireland. It's an island off the coast of Northern Ireland, and there's a strong tradition there. And if you read any history of it, there was a massacre there. There was invasion of Ireland that was spawned from there. All kinds of history on this one little island off the coast. But this story is about a man, Daniel McAllister, that came back there. And we're going to talk about that. But before I get to the story, I want to tell you about the word. Brave Spalpen, or brave, the word Spalpen is an Irish word. So none of us would know. I had to look it up. And so, and like a lot of words, we think about a lot of things, and we know what the word means, but we don't necessarily know the context of it. A Spalpen is kind of an itinerant worker, somebody that travels around and does odd job to odd job. And kind of in our context, too, it's almost a derogatory term, like, oh, he's a Spalpen. Yeah, he can't find a home, and he wanders around, and he doesn't do work, But this is, so you're taking this character that has this derogatory tone and making him this person. The other thing to know about this story is this island, Rathlin, Ireland, with all these traditions. They were gathered together by this one lady in the 1800s. Her name was Katie Glass. And she was, I mean, if you see a picture of her, she looks like the wise old crone. She has a hooded, gown on, and she just walks around with this guy named Sam Henry. He was a government worker, and he went and met her, and he wrote down all her stories. And then a couple of years later, there was a guy named Colin Irwin, and he collected all these Irish stories from Katie Glass to Sam Henry to Colin Irwin, to his book called The Iron Hag, which is a totally great story for another time. And it's their stories and the stories of people of Rathlin, Ireland, that I get to share this story with you, the brave Spalpen. Daniel McAllister, once upon a time, had lived on the islands in Northern Ireland itself. But like many young men at the time, he was called up to war. So Daniel McAllister went, like many men. And he had wounds and scars, physical scars from the war. But the ones that cut the deepest were the ones inside that you couldn't necessarily see. At the time, they called it heart-scalded. Today, it was eventually called it eventually became called PTSD. But at the time, heart-scalded was like your heart was torn. Your soul was rendered from your heart. He saw things in war and in battle that nobody should ever see, and he lived through it. He saw men that cried for their mothers while they lay dying on the battlefield, soldiers that had their heads and their arms blown away from their body as they lay dying. He saw horrible, horrible things, but he came back home. He survived, and many did not. And while that tore his heart apart, he was still brave, and he was still steadfast, and he had a strong, steady hand, and he loved to do work. And so that's why he became a Spalpen. He didn't want to settle in one place. He wanted to travel around and see the country and do work and help people. And so it was one day he came to a farm, and he walked along this deep road that rutted into the ground from centuries of people traveling over it with horses and donkeys and wagons. And he follows this long stone wall until he gets to the entrance of this farm. And everything's kind of worn and torn down. And he's like, this is a huge farm. It should make a great profit. What's going on here? So he goes to the farmer. He knocks on the door, and the farmer comes out, and he talks to him, and he says, can I work on your farm? It looks like you have a lot that needs to be done here. Farmer yeah, but most people don't stay. It's like, well, what's the problem? It's like, well, to tell you the truth, it's ghosts. It's ghosts. Well, I've seen many a bad thing in my life. I don't know that ghosts would bother me. Farmer says, they're horrible. They're horrible ghosts. They keep me awake all night. You can't lie down without hearing them. And every person that's come to help work on my farm has run away after the first night. They haven't even lasted one single night. And Spalpen, Daniel, says, well, how about you give me some dinner? And I'll think about it. I'll think about whether I want to work on your farm. So the farmer invites him into his home, into his kitchen, and they sit down at the table, and there in the kitchen is the farmer's daughter. Her name is Martha. She's about the same age as Daniel, and he can tell that she's careworn, for the farmer's wife had died long ago, and it was his only daughter, Martha, that had helped him take care of the farm and take care of the house, and she was tired, but she was still beautiful, and Daniel couldn't keep his eyes off of her. And so they sat down together and they ate their meal. And Daniel said, I'll take care of your 3 ghosts, but I'll need some things. The farmer is like, whatever you need. You think you can really get rid of the ghosts? Daniel says, yeah, I'll give it my best shot. The farmer says, if you can get rid of the ghosts, I will give you half of my farm and more than enough money to get started as a farmer yourself. Daniel says, that makes this even better. He said, what I need from you is I need 4 glasses. I need your best whiskey and 4 pipes and enough tobacco to fill each of them. Farmer says, we can do that. So he goes and gathers all this stuff, and they bring it to him. And the ghosts are known to reside up on top of the hill. Massive farm, old castle sits up on this hillside. So Daniel gets himself together, composes himself, gets his whiskey in his glasses and tobacco and pipes, and he goes up to that hillside to the castle, and there's an old table turned over in the great hall, and he takes that table and heaves it up, kind of wipes it off with his hand, plunks down his 3 glasses. And then he takes some stones and stacks them up and makes himself a chair. He gets over and gets out his tin. He stoops down in the big fireplace in the great hall, starts to build a warm, crackling fire. Smoke starts to go up the chimney. Sets himself down at the table. He packs those 4 pipes and just sets them there. He gets his whiskey out, pours in 4 glasses. He just waits. He wants to be cool, calm, collected, and sober when anything happens. He knows the witching hour. It's midnight. That fire's crackling and smoking. About midnight, he starts to see these bony legs start to come down out of that chimney. There's just ragged clothing coming off of it. And then fingers, all skin taut and dried. And then it keeps coming in like a dried rib cage with just flesh barely hanging on. And finally, he can see the skull. The nose is gone and deep black eye sockets and wispy gray hair all around. That ghost starts to make noise and dance around in front of him. And right after, he sees another pair of feet. And finally, a 3rd pair of feet descend. Same thing. Hollow black eyes, wispy gray hair, 3 ghosts howling in front of him. He says, "All right, gentlemen, why don't we sit down at the table and we have a discussion?" But the ghosts don't like that. They start to howl. They start to yowl. They start to spin around the castle. Stones start to shake and fall down. Neighbors for years would talk about the noise they heard up on that hill that night. It was unlike anything they had heard before. The sky was dark. The noise was loud. Nobody left their house. And so the ghosts finally came down because Daniel just sat there. Again, he was brave and he was calm. He was collected. Now he started sipping his whiskey, just a little bit at a time. He said, "Gentlemen, come on, let's sit down and have a discussion." They wanted nothing to do with it. They started screaming and yowling and twirling around again, but this time they reached into the fireplace and pulled out everything that they could. Every demon and every ghost, every wraith that they could pull out, no matter how horrible it was. Daniel sat stone cold still. I wish I could be like that. I would not. But there he sat, Daniel, calm, collected, and finally, unshaken. The ghost almost didn't know what to do, and they finally settled down in front of him again. He said, "Gentlemen, let's sit down and smoke and have a drink." And this time, the ghosts did. And they took the pipes and started to smoke. And let me tell you, that smoke would come out of their ears, it would come out of their eyes, it even came out of, everywhere else too. And then they started sipping that whiskey, and they all agreed that was the finest whiskey that they had had. And they started to talk to Daniel. And come to find out, these were the father, grandfather, and the great-grandfather of the farmer. And how they had gotten such a large farm is because they had cheated, lied, stole from everybody around them. And their ghosts, their souls could not be saved or laid to rest, and they could not move on until they made amends for the way they had treated everyone around them. They had hoped their son would help them with this task, but he was not the man to do it. But they finally thought that in Daniel, after spending the night talking to him, that they had the right person. So it was that they asked Daniel to help them make amends for what he had done wrong. And they told him where a hoard of gold was, and he went and dug that up, and he started to distribute that money to all the places the ghost had told him to do. And it was that after that time, the farmer, the ghost went away. They weren't keeping people awake. The farmer and his daughter could sleep all through the night. And the farmer, at Martha's behest, because the farmer had a little bit of his grandfather's and father in him, he didn't want to give him the half of a farm that he had promised him. But Martha said to do it, and he did. And after an appropriate amount of time, Martha and Daniel were wed, and they raised their kids there. And eventually, once the farmer passed away, Daniel and Martha lived on that farm. And as far as I know, they've lived happily ever after. But every once in a while, Daniel, when he's out working late at night, he'd go up to that castle and he'd see these 3 white owls making a little bit of racket. But then they would see him and they'd fly off into the night sky. And there you go, the brave Spalpen.
If you enjoyed this story, you're in for a spine-tingling treat at Appalachian Horror Fest 2025, scheduled for Saturday, October 11th, 2025. This event promises to be a day-long, immersive experience that will transport you into the heart of Appalachian horror and to the rich legacy of storytelling. Imagine stepping into a world where the chilling tradition of Appalachian folklore comes to life. Our event will feature captivating live musical performances, thrilling shows that will keep you on the edge of your seat, and an array of vendors offering unique and spooky merchandise. Don't miss the numerous photo ops throughout the event, perfect for capturing memories with friends and family against haunting backdrops. The highlight of the night will be our grand storytelling show, where the master storytellers will weave tales that send shivers down your spine and ignite your imagination. Appalachian Horror Fest is actively recruiting storytellers, musicians, volunteers, vendors, and sponsors to help make the festival an unforgettable experience. For more information or to get involved, visit our website at www.appalachianhorrorfest.com. Join us in making Appalachian Horror Fest 2025 the best yet. Ravensvale Coven is a production of Small Raven Media. Audio engineering and sound design by Nick Devan at Nicky D Sound. Copyrighted 2023 by Small Raven Media. All rights reserved.